When the galaxy looked away, humanity protected them. The emergency beacon pierced through the void of space like a dying scream. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the holographic display show the distress signal's origin. The coordinates led to a star system that shouldn't exist on any map, at least not on human maps. Captain, we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Kepler 442 system, Lieutenant Rodriguez called out from the communications station. His voice carried an edge of confusion. The signals are strange. They're not in any language our translators recognize. Sarah frowned as she studied the tactical display. 3 months ago, humanity had achieved something the galaxy thought impossible. They had defeated the Void Hunters, an ancient species that had terrorized civilized worlds for millennia. Every major galactic power had tried and failed to stop them. The Altarian Empire, with their advanced energy weapons. The Crystalline Confederation, with their living ships. The Tech Priests of Vega, with their AI armies. All had fallen before the endless hunger of the Void Hunters. But humans were different. Humans were stubborn. Set course for the Kepler system, Sarah ordered. Maximum speed. Captain, her first officer, Commander Walsh, stepped closer and lowered his voice. That system is deep in uncharted space. If we respond to every distress call, we'll never make it back to Earth. Command expects us to return for the victory parade in 2 weeks. Sarah looked at the display again. The signals were getting weaker. Someone out there was dying, and the galaxy's major powers were probably too proud or too scared to help. After the Void Hunter War, most species had retreated to their home systems to lick their wounds. The galaxy had become a lonely place. Commander, what did we fight for if not to protect those who can't protect themselves? Sarah asked. Change course. The Defiance was one of humanity's newest ships, built during the desperate final years of the war. Unlike the elegant vessels of other species, human ships looked like they were designed by engineers who expected everything to go wrong. Thick armor plating, redundant systems, and enough firepower to level a small moon. The galaxy had called human ship design crude and inelegant. They stopped laughing when human fleets started winning battles. As they jumped to hyperspace, Sarah remembered the first time she had seen a Void Hunter ship. She had been a young ensign then, serving aboard the UES Marathon during the Battle of Proxima. The Void Hunter vessel had been beautiful in a terrifying way, a flowing, organic shape that seemed to bend light around it. It had torn through the Marathon's sister ship, the UES Achilles, like paper. That was before humans learned to fight dirty. The hyperspace jump lasted 6 hours. When they emerged in normal space, the bridge crew fell silent. The Kepler system was a graveyard. Debris floated everywhere, pieces of ships, stations, and structures that looked nothing like human technology. The local star, a dim red dwarf, cast an eerie glow over the wreckage. But it wasn't just any wreckage. Sarah recognized the distinctive spiral patterns of Void Hunter bioships mixed among the debris. My God, whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez. There was a battle here. A recent one. Sensors, give me a full sweep, Sarah ordered. I want to know what happened here. The science officer, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, hunched over her station. Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures consistent with Void Hunter weapons. But there are other signatures too. Unknown technology. The battle ended approximately 18 hours ago. Survivors? Scanning now. Captain, I'm detecting life signs. Multiple contacts, bearing 27 Mark IV. They're in escape pods. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. How many? At least 50 pods, Captain. All transmitting distress signals in the same unknown language we detected earlier. Commander Walsh stepped forward. Captain, we should be careful. This could be a trap. The Void Hunters were known for their deception tactics. Sarah studied the tactical display. The escape pods were scattered across a wide area, their signals growing weaker by the hour. Whatever had happened here, these beings had fought the Void Hunters and somehow survived. That alone deserved respect. Launch recovery shuttles, she ordered. I want those survivors aboard within the hour. All of them, Captain, asked the shuttle bay coordinator. All of them. The recovery operation took 3 hours. One by one, the escape pods were brought aboard the Defiance. Each pod was different, some crystalline, others metallic, a few that seemed to be grown rather than built. When the first pod was opened in the cargo bay, Sarah was there to witness it. The being that emerged was unlike anything in the galactic database. It stood about 4 feet tall, with iridescent blue skin and large, multifaceted eyes that reflected light like jewels. 6 delicate arms ended in hands with too many fingers, and it wore what looked like living armor that shifted colors as it moved. Dr. Tanaka's universal translator crackled to life. Please, help, others, dying. Sarah knelt down to the being's level. We're here to help. You're safe now. The being's eyes focused on her with obvious intelligence. You, human? The ones who fought the Devourers? Devourers? Sarah glanced at Dr. Tanaka, who shrugged. If you mean the Void Hunters, yes. We fought them. The being's armor rippled through what might have been relief or hope. My name translates to Crystal Singer. I was guardian of the Reef Worlds. The Devourers came to our system 3 days ago. We fought them, but you're alive, Sarah said gently. That means you won. Crystal Singer's armor darkened. We did not win. We merely survived. At great cost. Over the next several hours, as the survivors were treated in the medical bay, a story began to emerge. The beings called themselves the Kithara, and they were something the galaxy had never seen before, a collective of refugee species who had banded together for mutual protection. Dr. Tanaka briefed Sarah in her ready room. Captain, this is remarkable. The Kithara aren't a single species, they're dozens of species working together. Some I recognize from the galactic database as extinct civilizations. Sarah looked through the datapad containing species profiles. The singing crystals of Vega 7, thought destroyed 2 centuries ago. The reef builders of the Outer Rim, who had vanished without a trace 50 years back. The memory keepers of Tau Ceti, whose entire world had been found empty and lifeless. They weren't extinct, Sarah realized. They were hiding. From the Void Hunters, yes. And, apparently, from everyone else too. Captain, some of these species have technology that makes our ships look primitive. Others have abilities that border on what we might call magic. But they all have one thing in common: they were too peaceful or too small to fight back when the Void Hunters found them. Sarah set down the datapad. So they ran. They did more than run, Captain. They found each other. They built a hidden civilization in the spaces between the major trade routes. The Kithara have been quietly rescuing survivors of Void Hunter attacks for over 200 years. A chime at the door interrupted their conversation. Come, Sarah called. Crystal Singer entered, moving with a grace that made Sarah think of underwater dancers. The being's armor had settled into a deep blue color that seemed to pulse with its heartbeat. Captain Chen, I have come to thank you for your kindness. My people will remember this. It's what anyone would do, Sarah said. Crystal Singer's large eyes seemed to shimmer. No, Captain. It is not what anyone would do. It is what humans do. When we sent our distress calls, we expected no one to answer. The great powers of the galaxy have turned inward since the Devourer War ended. They tend to their own wounds and ignore the cries of others. Sarah felt a chill. Are you saying other species are in trouble? Captain, Crystal Singer moved closer, and Sarah could see the weariness in the alien's posture. The Devourers are not gone. You humans dealt them a great defeat, yes. You destroyed their main fleets and shattered their command structure. But scattered groups still hunt in the dark spaces. And they are angry. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her datapad. How angry? Angry enough to take revenge on anyone they see as weak. The major galactic powers have strong defenses now. But, small colonies, independent traders, refugee settlements, we are easy targets for their rage. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. How many attacks have there been since the war ended? 17 that we know of. Probably more. The galaxy is vast, and communication between the smaller civilizations is limited. Commander Walsh, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. Captain, this isn't our responsibility. We defeated the main Void Hunter threat. We can't patrol the entire galaxy. Crystal Singer's armor shifted to a pale yellow color. The commander is correct. It is not your responsibility. Just as it was not your responsibility to fight the Devourers in the first place. Yet you did. Just as it was not your responsibility to answer our distress call. Yet you did. Sarah looked out the viewport at the debris field. Somewhere in that wreckage were the remains of beings who had died fighting monsters. They had died protecting others, just as humans had done during the war. Crystal Singer, do you have contact with other Kythera settlements? Some. We have a network of hidden relay stations. Communication is slow but possible. Could you get a message to them? Ask them to report any Void Hunter activity they've seen? The alien's armor rippled through several colors before settling on a warm gold. Yes. But, Captain, what will you do with such information? Sarah looked at Commander Walsh, then, at Dr. Tanaka. Both of them knew what she was thinking. Walsh looked resigned. Tanaka looked excited. We're going to do what we do best, Sarah said finally. We're going to hunt monsters. Crystal Singer's large eyes seemed to grow even larger. But, Captain, your people must be eager for peace after such a long war. Why would you choose to continue fighting? Sarah thought about Earth, green and blue and beautiful, protected now from the Void Hunters. She thought about the victory parades waiting for them, the medals and speeches and comfortable retirement that awaited every veteran of the war. Then, she thought about the 17 attacks Crystal Singer had mentioned. 17 settlements that had suffered while the galaxy looked away. Because someone has to, she said simply. Over the next 2 days, the Defiance became a floating refugee center. The Kythera survivors were remarkably adaptable, quickly learning to navigate the human ship and even helping with repairs to their own escape pods. Sarah was amazed by their diversity. Some were energy beings who communicated through color changes, others were crystalline creatures who sang in harmonics that could shatter glass, and still others were so alien that even the universal translators struggled to interpret their communications. But they all shared one thing: they had all lost their homes to the Void Hunters. Dr. Tanaka spent most of her time in the science labs, working with Kythera scientists and technicians to understand their technology. What she discovered amazed even Sarah. Captain, they've been developing anti-Void Hunter weapons for centuries, Tanaka reported during their daily briefing. Some of their energy shields can actually repel Void Hunter bioweapons. Others have developed sonic weapons that disrupt the Hunter's nervous systems. Why didn't they use these weapons in the battle here? They did, Captain. The fact that anyone survived at all is because of these weapons. But, the Kythera are mostly civilians. Scientists, artists, engineers, teachers. They're not soldiers. Sarah nodded. She was beginning to understand what had happened here. A civilian convoy had been attacked by Void Hunter raiders. They had fought back with whatever weapons they had, probably saving more lives than they lost. But, they weren't warriors. Humans were. On the third day, Crystal Singer brought Sarah the information she had requested. The holographic display in the conference room showed a map of the galaxy with dozens of red markers scattered across the outer regions. These are confirmed Void Hunter attacks since your war ended, Crystal Singer explained. Most have been on isolated colonies or trading posts. But, 3 have been on refugee settlements like ours. Sarah studied the pattern. The attacks weren't random. They formed a rough spiral moving outward from what had once been Void Hunter space. They're following the refugee routes, she realized. They're hunting the survivors of their previous attacks. Yes, Crystal Singer's armor darkened to a deep purple. They call it the final culling. If they cannot rebuild their empire, they will make sure no one escapes it. Commander Walsh leaned forward. Captain, even if we wanted to help, we're just one ship. We can't be everywhere at once. Sarah looked at the map again, counting the red markers. 17 attacks. Hundreds, maybe thousands of dead. And, somewhere out there, more Void Hunter raiders were planning their next strike. You're right, Commander. We can't be everywhere. She turned to Crystal Singer. But, we don't have to be. How many ships could the Kithara put together? The alien's armor flickered through several colors before settling on a cautious orange. Ships? Captain, we are not a military force. Our vessels are designed for exploration, research, evacuation. How many? Sarah pressed. Perhaps 40 vessels of various sizes. But, Captain, they are not warships. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. Neither was the Defiance when we started fighting the Void Hunters. We made her into one. She looked around the conference room at her officers. The galaxy's major powers are looking inward. Fine. That leaves the outer systems to us. Us, asked Commander Walsh. The Kithara have the intelligence network and the local knowledge. We have the experience fighting Void Hunters and the weapons to do it. Together, we might be able to protect the colonies that everyone else is ignoring. Crystal Singer's armor began cycling through rapid color changes. What Sarah had learned was their equivalent of excitement mixed with fear. Captain, do you truly mean this? You would help us protect the Forgotten Worlds? Sarah looked at the map one more time, memorizing the positions of the red markers. Somewhere behind each marker was a story like Crystal Singer's, civilians who had fought impossible odds and lost everything. The galaxy might be looking away, Sarah said, but humanity isn't. As the Defiance prepared to leave the Kepler system, now carrying nearly 100 Kithara refugees, Sarah stood on the bridge watching the stars. In 3 hours, they would rendezvous with the first Kithara ship, a converted science vessel called the Harmony's Dream. Together, they would begin hunting the scattered Void Hunter raiders that the major powers were ignoring. It wouldn't be easy. The Void Hunters, even in their weakened state, were still among the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. And, Sarah's crew was tired after years of war. They deserved to go home. But, home would still be there when this was finished. The refugee settlements might not be. Course laid in, Captain, reported the navigation officer. Take us out, Sarah ordered. The Defiance turned away from the debris field and jumped to hyperspace, carrying its unusual cargo toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the wreckage of the battle slowly tumbled in the light of the red dwarf star, a monument to courage in the face of impossible odds. It would not be the last such monument they would see. The converted science vessel Harmony's Dream looked nothing like a warship. Its sleek, organic curves were designed for long-range exploration, not combat. Crystalline sensor arrays jutted from its hull like frozen flowers, and its engines hummed with a musical tone that made Sarah think of wind chimes. Captain Chen stood in the Defiance's docking bay, watching Kithara engineers work alongside her human crew. They had been modifying both ships for the past week, combining human weapons technology with Kithara defensive systems. The result was something neither species had imagined possible. The resonance shields are online, Captain, reported Chief Engineer Martinez, wiping grease from her hands with a rag that had seen better days. The Kithara harmonic generators are tied into our main deflector array. If their calculations are correct, Void Hunter bioacids won't be able to penetrate our hull. Sarah nodded, watching a Kithara technician whose species looked like walking trees carefully adjust a crystal matrix that had been grafted onto a human plasma cannon. The collaboration had been remarkable to witness. Despite their vast differences, both species shared an engineer's love of making things work better. Any word from the other Kithara vessels? Sarah asked. Commander Walsh approached, carrying a datapad that displayed their growing fleet. 37 ships have joined us so far, Captain. Most are converted civilian vessels like the Harmony's Dream, but a few are unusual. Sarah raised an eyebrow. define unusual. There's a ship called the Singing Garden that's apparently a living organism. Another one, the Memory Vault, seems to be constructed entirely from crystallized time. Crystallized time? Dr. Tanaka appeared at Sarah's shoulder, her eyes bright with scientific excitement. The memory keepers of Tau Ceti developed temporal technology before they went into hiding. Their ships exist in multiple time streams simultaneously. Void Hunter weapons literally can't hit them because they're not entirely in the same moment. Sarah rubbed her temples. After 3 months of working with the Kithara, she was getting used to impossible things being routine. And these ships are all crewed by refugees? Refugees who've been fighting for their lives for 2 centuries, Walsh confirmed. They might not be soldiers in the traditional sense, but they know more about Void Hunter tactics than anyone except us. A chime from the communications station interrupted their conversation. Lieutenant Rodriguez turned toward them, his expression serious. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Kithara relay network. It's Crystal Singer. On screen. Crystal Singer's image appeared in the holographic display, but the usually vibrant colors of their armor were muted and worried. Captain Chen, we have received word from the Spiral Arm settlements. 3 more colonies have gone dark in the past 2 days. No distress signals, no survivors. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Locations? The agricultural world of Haven's Rest, the mining station at Asteroid Belt 7 Alpha, and... Crystal Singer paused, their armor flickering to a distressed red. The Children's Sanctuary at Little Hope. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew about Little Hope, a small station where the Kithara cared for orphans from destroyed worlds. It was supposed to be one of the most secret and well-protected locations in their network. How many children? Sarah asked quietly. 237, plus their caretakers. Sarah closed her eyes, forcing herself to think tactically instead of emotionally. Any evidence of Void Hunter involvement? The Haven's Rest colony managed to transmit 17 seconds of an attack. The signatures match Void Hunter bioships, but... Crystal Singer hesitated. But, what? The ships were different from the ones we fought during the war. Smaller, but more aggressive. And, Captain, they were working in coordination with something else. Something that jammed all communications before the attack. Dr. Tanaka leaned forward. A new variant? Possibly. Or perhaps the surviving Void Hunters have allied with another hostile species. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at the star map displaying their current position. They were still 2 days away from the nearest attack site, and the trail would be cold by then. But maybe that wasn't the point. Crystal Singer, can you predict where they'll hit next? The Kithara's armor shifted to thoughtful blue. Perhaps. There is a pattern to the attacks. They seem to be following the old refugee routes, but in reverse. As if they're backtracking to find the source, Sarah finished. They're not just killing randomly. They're hunting the Kithara network itself. Commander Walsh stepped closer to the display. Captain, if they're following the refugee routes backward, then, eventually they'll reach the core worlds, Crystal Singer confirmed. Where the largest Kithara settlements are hidden. Where nearly 500,000 refugees have made their homes. Sarah felt the weight of that number. 500,000 beings who had survived the Void Hunter raids only to face them again in the one place they thought they were safe. How long before they reached the core worlds? At their current rate of advance, perhaps 2 weeks. Maybe less if they abandoned stealth and attacked directly. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were tired. They had already fought one impossible war and won. But she could see in their eyes that they understood what needed to be done. All ships, prepare for immediate departure, Sarah ordered. We're going hunting. The mixed fleet of human and Kithara vessels moved through hyperspace like a school of exotic fish. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the tactical display show their formation. 38 ships of wildly different designs, all united by a common purpose. The plan was ambitious and, probably insane. Instead of chasing the Void Hunter raiders and always arriving too late, they were going to get ahead of them and set a trap. The Kithara had identified a choke point along the refugee routes, a nebula called the Morning Veil, where ships were forced to drop out of hyperspace to navigate safely. If they could get there first, they could ambush the raiders before they reached the next target. Captain, Dr. Tanaka called from her science station. I'm getting some interesting readings from the Kithara ships. Their energy signatures are fluctuating in patterns I haven't seen before. Sarah looked at the sensor displays. The Kithara vessels were indeed showing unusual energy spikes, but they seemed to be synchronized. Are they powering weapons? No, Captain. It's more like they're singing. Sarah blinked. Singing? Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from communications. Captain, I'm detecting harmonic frequencies being transmitted between the Kithara ships. It's incredibly complex, dozens of different tones weaving together. Crystal Singer's voice came over the intercom from their position on the bridge. Forgive us, Captain. We should have warned you. When Kithara ships travel together, they often share the journey song. It helps coordinate our movements and eases the fear. Sarah listened to the harmonics filtering through the ship's systems. It was hauntingly beautiful, like whale song mixed with the sound of crystal wind chimes. But, underneath the beauty, she could hear something else. Determination. Crystal Singer, can human ships join the journey song? I do not know. No human ship has ever tried. But, if you wish to attempt it. Dr. Tanaka was already at her console, analyzing the harmonic patterns. Captain, I think I can modify our communications array to match some of their frequencies. It would be like joining a choir. Do it. Minutes later, the Defiance added its voice to the journey song. The ship's communications array projected a deep, thrumming bass note that harmonized with the Kithara melodies. Other human ships in the fleet began joining in, each adding their own frequencies to the growing symphony. Sarah had never experienced anything like it. The song seemed to flow through the ship itself, connecting every crew member to the larger purpose of their mission. It was a war song and a funeral dirge and a lullaby all at once. Approaching the Morning Veil, reported the navigation officer. On the main screen, the nebula appeared as a vast cloud of purple and gold gas, shot through with veins of darker matter. It was beautiful and ominous, the perfect place for an ambush. All ships, take position, Sarah ordered. Remember, we want the raiders to think we're just another refugee convoy until it's too late. The fleet dispersed throughout the nebula, human ships hiding behind gas clouds while Kithara vessels used their advanced sensor arrays to watch for approaching enemies. The Harmony's Dream positioned itself in the center of the formation, broadcasting a fake distress signal designed to lure the Void Hunter raiders into the trap. They didn't have to wait long. Contact, whispered Lieutenant Rodriguez. 3 ships, bearing Mark 7-2. There. God, Captain, they're big. The tactical display showed 3 massive bioships emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the nebula. But, these weren't the Void Hunter vessels Sarah remembered from the war. They were sleeker, more predatory looking, with weapon arrays that pulsed with an angry red light. They're scanning the nebula, reported Dr. Tanaka. Energy signatures are. Captain, those aren't pure Void Hunter ships. The weapon signatures match, but the hull configurations are different. Sarah studied the approaching vessels. They moved with the fluid grace of Void Hunter bioships, but their hulls showed clear signs of technological grafting. Crystalline weapon arrays that looked Altarian. Shield generators that resembled crystalline Confederation designs. Energy cores that pulsed with the distinctive blue light of vegan technology. They've been scavenging, she realized. Taking technology from the species they've destroyed and adding it to their own ships. Crystal Singer's armor darkened to an alarmed orange. Captain, this explains how they've been so successful in their attacks. They're using the weapons of their victims against other victims. The hybrid Void Hunter ships moved deeper into the nebula, clearly attracted by the Harmony's Dream's distress signal. Sarah waited until they were well within the trap before giving the order. All ships, attack. The nebula exploded with weapons fire. Human plasma cannons and Kythera energy projectors lanced out from hidden positions, striking the surprised raiders. The hybrid ships reacted faster than Sarah had expected, their stolen shield generators flaring to life and their grafted weapons returning fire. But the surprise was complete. The lead raider ship, a massive biovessel with what looked like an entire Altarian weapons platform grafted to its spine, staggered under the combined fire of 6 ships. Its bio-armor cracked, leaking luminescent fluids into the nebula gas. Target their weapon grafts, Sarah ordered. Those additions are probably less well integrated than their natural systems. The battle became a deadly dance among the gas clouds. The Void Hunter raiders were skilled and their hybrid technology gave them surprising firepower, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The Kythera ships used their advanced sensors to coordinate attacks, while human vessels used their superior armor to absorb punishment and keep fighting. The memory vault, the crystalline time ship, proved devastating in combat. It would appear next to a raider ship, unleash a barrage of temporal energy weapons that aged the target's hull to the point of collapse, then vanish into a different time stream before return fire could reach it. But the raiders weren't going down easily. The largest ship, its hull studded with weapons from a dozen different species, managed to break through the formation and target the Harmony's Dream directly. Bioplasma cannons that should have been impossible to mount on a living ship opened fire, forcing the science vessel to retreat behind a gas cloud. The flagship's heading for the Harmony's Dream, reported Commander Walsh. They're targeting our command ship. Sarah gritted her teeth. The Kythera vessel had minimal weapons and couldn't survive a direct assault. All ships, priority target the flagship. Cover the Harmony's Dream. The Defiance led the charge, its retrofitted weapons blazing. The Kythera harmonic shields held against the return fire, but Sarah could see her ship's armor beginning to buckle under the assault. The flagship was simply too large and too well armed. Then, the Singing Garden joined the battle. Sarah had wondered what a living ship would look like in combat. The answer was terrifying and beautiful. The Singing Garden flowed through space like a massive organic jellyfish, its bioluminescent patches pulsing with aggression. When it opened fire, it didn't use conventional weapons, instead, it sang. The harmonic attack was unlike anything Sarah had ever witnessed. The Singing Garden's voice, amplified to impossible volumes, struck the flagship like a physical force. The bioship's hull began to resonate, its stolen technology failing as the hybrid systems couldn't handle the harmonic interference. Their shield generators are failing, Dr. Tanaka reported with amazement. The harmonic attack is disrupting the stolen technology. Sarah saw the opportunity. All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship while their shields are down. The combined firepower of 38 ships struck the massive raider like a hammer. The grafted weapons exploded in showers of sparks and biofluids. The Altarian energy cores overloaded. The crystalline shield matrices shattered. The flagship, its hybrid systems in complete failure, tried to retreat. But it was too late. The memory vault appeared one final time, directly above the fleeing raider, and released a concentrated burst of temporal energy. The massive bioship aged 1,000 years in seconds. Its hull cracked, its stolen technology crumbled to dust, and its biosystems withered and died. The flagship broke apart in a cloud of ancient debris. The 2 remaining raiders, seeing their leader destroyed, attempted to flee. One made it to hyperspace, damaged but alive. The other was caught by a coordinated attack from 3 Kythera vessels and destroyed before it could escape. In the aftermath of the battle, as damage reports came in from across the fleet, Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had struck the first blow against the Void Hunter survivors. But she knew this was only the beginning. Casualties, she asked. Light across the fleet, Commander Walsh reported. The Harmony's Dream took some hull damage, and 2 of our escort ships need repairs, but no ships were lost. And the raiders? 2 destroyed, 1 escaped. Captain, we recovered some interesting debris from the flagship. Dr. Tanaka's voice carried excitement. The hybrid technology wasn't just scavenged, it was systematically integrated. Someone with advanced technical knowledge helped them retrofit their ships. Sarah frowned. You're saying the Void Hunters have allies? Or servants? The integration patterns suggest the work was done by multiple species, but all following the same design philosophy. Crystal Singer approached the command area, their armor a mix of satisfaction and concern. Captain, this explains much. The raiders have not just been scavenging, they have been recruiting. Forcing captured scientists and engineers to improve their ships. Slaves, Sarah said grimly. Yes. Which means somewhere out there is a base where they are holding prisoners and building more hybrid ships. Sarah looked at the tactical display, where the surviving raider ship was already beyond sensor range. It would carry word of the attack back to its masters, warning them that someone was fighting back. Good. Let them know humanity was coming. All ships, form up, Sarah ordered. We're going to follow that survivor home. The mixed fleet regrouped among the dissipating gas clouds of the morning veil. The Kithara ships resumed their journey song, but now the melody carried notes of triumph mixed with the underlying determination. Human vessels added their own harmonics to the chorus. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace in pursuit of the fleeing raider, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore, or even a defensive action. They were taking the fight to the enemy. The galaxy's major powers might be looking inward, ignoring the suffering on the outer rim. But humanity and the Kithara had formed something new, a coalition of the forgotten, fighting for those who had no one else to protect them. The escaped raider had a head start, but Sarah wasn't worried. They had something the Void Hunters had never faced before, an alliance between humanity's stubborn refusal to give up and the Kithara's deep knowledge of the galaxy's hidden places. Together, they would hunt monsters in the dark. Together, they would make the galaxy remember that some things were worth protecting, especially when everyone else looked away. The trail led them to the edge of known space, beyond the furthest human colonies and deep into what the star charts labeled as unexplored territory. But, as their combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates where the surviving raider had disappeared, Sarah realized the region wasn't as empty as the maps suggested. Captain, Dr. Tanaka called from her science station, her voice tight with disbelief. You need to see this. The main viewscreen shifted to show long-range sensor data. What they found defied explanation. Hanging in the void between two dying stars was a massive structure, part space station, part asteroid, part something else entirely. It looked like someone had taken a small moon, hollowed it out, then welded the salvaged hulks of 1,000 different ships to its surface. My God, whispered Commander Walsh. How big is that thing? Approximately 40 kilometers in diameter, Dr. Tanaka reported. But, Captain, the composition it's built from debris. Wreckage from dozens of different species. I'm seeing hull fragments from Altarian cruisers, crystalline bioships, even pieces of old human freighters. Sarah studied the tactical display. The construct was defended by a fleet of hybrid ships similar to the ones they had fought in the Morning Veil, but these looked even more advanced. More integrated. More dangerous. Crystal Singer moved closer to the command area, their armor cycling through patterns of recognition and horror. Captain, I know this place. The Kithara have legends about it, the graveyard of ships. We thought it was myth. What kind of myth? A story told to frighten younglings. They say that somewhere in the dark between stars, the devourers built a nest from the bones of their victims. A place where they bring their prey to be consumed slowly. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You're saying this is a Void Hunter stronghold? More than that. According to the legends, it is where they bring their most valuable prisoners. Scientists, engineers, artists, anyone who might be useful to them alive rather than dead. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her sensors. Captain, I'm detecting massive power signatures from the interior of the construct. Whatever they're doing in there, it's drawing enormous amounts of energy. Life signs? Thousands of them. Multiple species. Captain, if Crystal Singer is right about prisoners. Sarah didn't need her to finish. If there were thousands of captured scientists and engineers being forced to work for the Void Hunters, it would explain how the Raiders had developed such advanced hybrid technology so quickly. It would also mean that somewhere in that nightmare construct were people who had been waiting years, maybe decades, for rescue. Fleet status report, Sarah ordered. Commander Walsh consulted his datapad. 37 ships operational, Captain. But, if we're going up against that kind of defensive force, we're outnumbered 3-1, Sarah finished. I can count. The command bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed the tactical reality. They had won their last battle through surprise and superior coordination, but this time the enemy would be waiting for them. The Void Hunters would have had time to prepare defenses, coordinate their hybrid ships, and maybe even call for reinforcements. Captain, Crystal Singer said quietly, there may be another way. Sarah turned toward the alien representative. I'm listening. The construct, the graveyard of ships, it was not built by the Devourers alone. According to our legends, they forced their prisoners to help design and build it. Which means the prisoners might know how to get inside, Sarah realized. But, how do we contact them? Dr. Tanaka's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. Captain, remember the harmonic frequencies the Kithara use for long-range communication? If we could amplify those through the nebula, we could send a message directly to the construct, Sarah nodded. But, the Void Hunters would detect any transmission. Crystal Singer's armor shifted to a thoughtful blue. Not necessarily. Kithara harmonic communication operates on frequencies that most species cannot detect. The Devourers have never learned to monitor our songs. Sarah looked at the tactical display again. The graveyard of ships hung in space like a malevolent star, its surface crawling with defensive installations and patrol ships. But, if they could make contact with the prisoners inside. Do it, she ordered. Send the message. The next several hours were tense ones. The combined fleet held position at the edge of sensor range while the Harmony's Dream used its advanced communication arrays to broadcast harmonic signals toward the construct. The messages were simple identification codes that would let any Kithara prisoners know that help had arrived, followed by basic tactical information about the attacking fleet. They almost missed the reply when it came. Captain, Lieutenant Rodriguez called out, his voice excited. I'm picking up a harmonic response from the construct. It's not just Kithara frequencies. There are human harmonics in there too. Sarah's heart jumped. Human? Yes, Captain. Someone is using our communications protocols, but encoded in the harmonic patterns. It's incredibly sophisticated. Dr. Tanaka was already analyzing the incoming data. Captain, they're sending us schematics. Detailed plans of the construct's interior layout, defensive systems, even guard rotations. The holographic display filled with complex diagrams showing the internal structure of the graveyard of ships. What they revealed was both fascinating and horrifying. The construct was indeed built from salvaged ship hulls welded together, but the interior had been completely rebuilt. Vast chambers housed what looked like research facilities, manufacturing plants, and prison complexes. Look at this, Dr. Tanaka pointed to a section of the display. They've got thousands of prisoners working in different sections. Scientists in the research labs, engineers in the manufacturing centers, artists and cultural specialists in what looks like propaganda facilities? Crystal Singer's armor darkened to an alarmed red. They are forcing cultural specialists to create recruitment materials. Trying to convince other species to join them voluntarily. Sarah studied the schematics more closely. The prison complex was heavily guarded, but there were weaknesses. The Void Hunters had been so confident in their security that they had grown careless. And the prisoners had been observing, planning, waiting for an opportunity that had never come. Until now. There, Sarah pointed to a section of the construct that showed minimal guard presence. The Waste Recycling Center. According to these plans, it connects directly to the main prison complex, but it's only lightly defended because no one expects an attack from there. For good reason, Commander Walsh observed. Captain, the recycling center processes biological waste from the entire construct. The environmental hazards alone would kill most species within minutes. Most species, Sarah agreed. But humans have a talent for surviving in places that should kill us. Crystal Singer moved closer to examine the schematics. Captain, even if a small force could infiltrate through the recycling center, how would they free thousands of prisoners? The security systems are extremely sophisticated. Dr. Tanaka was studying a different section of the plans. Actually, they might not need to. Look at this, the prisoners have been working on the construct systems for decades. They built hidden access points, backup communication networks, even unauthorized modifications to critical systems. If we could get a signal to them to coordinate a simultaneous uprising. We create chaos from the inside while attacking from the outside, Sarah nodded. The prisoners know the systems better than their guards do. They could disable shields, weapons, communications, everything we need to get our ships close enough to extract them. The plan that emerged over the next few hours was complex, dangerous, and probably insane. But it was also the only chance the prisoners had. A small infiltration team would use modified shuttles to approach the construct through the asteroid field that surrounded it, using the debris to mask their approach. They would enter through the waste recycling center, fight their way to the main communication hub, and send the signal for a coordinated uprising. Meanwhile, the main fleet would use the chaos to break through the defensive perimeter and begin evacuating prisoners. The key was timing. If the infiltration failed, the main attack would be suicide. If the main attack was too early, the infiltration team would be trapped inside a fortress full of angry void hunters. Sarah volunteered to lead the infiltration team personally. Commander Walsh objected, Crystal Singer protested, and Dr. Tanaka suggested at least 30 reasons why it was tactically unsound. Sarah listened to all their arguments, nodded thoughtfully, and then ordered the shuttles prepared anyway. Captain, Commander Walsh said as they suited up in the shuttle bay, this is the kind of mission we usually send Marines on. You're a starship captain, not a commando. Sarah checked her weapons charge and sealed her helmet. Commander, during the Void Hunter War, do you know how many times I had to lead boarding actions personally? I know, Captain. 17. Because sometimes the only way to get something done right is to do it yourself. She turned to the assembled infiltration team, 6 humans and 3 Kithara volunteers who had insisted on coming along. Besides, someone needs to be there to coordinate with the prisoners. They're going to be scared and confused. They need to see a command officer, not just soldiers. The 3 modified shuttles launched from the Defiance under cover of an asteroid's shadow. They had been stripped of all non-essential systems and fitted with stealth generators borrowed from the Kithara ships. The plan was to use the debris field's natural interference to mask their approach. As they flew through the maze of wreckage surrounding the graveyard of ships, Sarah was struck by the sheer scope of destruction it represented. These weren't just random pieces of debris, they were the remains of hundreds, maybe thousands of ships from dozens of different species. Each piece represented a life lost, a family destroyed, a world left defenseless. Captain, the shuttle pilot, Lieutenant Kim, called back from the cockpit. Approaching the waste recycling intake. Fair warning, this is going to be unpleasant. The shuttle shuddered as it was caught in the construct's tractor beam and drawn into a massive opening in its hull. The recycling center was a nightmare of industrial machinery designed to break down biological waste from a dozen different species. The air was thick with noxious chemicals and the temperature was well above what most life forms could tolerate. But humans had evolved in an environment that was actively trying to kill them. They had learned to adapt. The infiltration team moved through the recycling center like ghosts, using the noise and chemical haze to mask their presence. The few Void Hunter technicians they encountered were quickly and quietly neutralized. Sarah was impressed by how efficiently her mixed human Kithara team worked together. The journey to the communication hub took nearly 2 hours of careful movement through maintenance tunnels and abandoned sections of the construct. Along the way, they saw signs of the prisoners' hidden modifications, extra data lines running through walls, concealed access panels, even small caches of improvised weapons. When they finally reached the communication center, they found it guarded by a single Void Hunter overseer and 2 enslaved technicians from species Sarah didn't recognize. The overseer never knew what hit him. Dr. Tanaka connected her portable equipment to the communication hub while Sarah and Crystal Singer worked to calm the terrified slave technicians. It took several minutes and the help of the universal translator, but eventually they managed to explain what was happening. They say there are coordinated resistance cells throughout the construct, Crystal Singer translated. The prisoners have been planning for this day for over 20 years. Sarah felt a surge of admiration for people who had maintained hope in the darkest possible circumstances. Tell them help is here. Tell them it's time. Dr. Tanaka looked up from her equipment. I'm connected to the hidden network. Sending activation codes now. Across the vast construct, hidden communication devices came to life. In research labs and manufacturing centers, in prison blocks and guard stations, enslaved scientists and engineers received the message they had been waiting decades to hear. The uprising began within minutes. Emergency alarms started blaring as prisoners overwhelmed their guards. Security systems went offline as captive engineers turned their forced expertise against their captors. Entire sections of the construct lost power as enslaved technicians sabotaged the systems they had been forced to maintain. Communications are down across 60% of the facility, Dr. Tanaka reported with satisfaction. Internal security is in complete chaos. Sarah activated her communicator. Defiance, this is Wolf Leader. The party has started. You are clear to crash. In space around the construct, the combined human Kithara fleet dropped their stealth fields and attacked. Without their communication and coordination systems, the Void Hunter defenders were caught completely off guard. Hybrid ships that should have worked together in perfect coordination found themselves fighting as individuals against a coordinated fleet. The Singing Garden led the assault, its harmonic weapons disrupting the stolen technology that formed the backbone of the Void Hunter defenses. Human ships followed up with concentrated plasma fire, while Kithara vessels used their advanced sensors to coordinate precision strikes against the construct's weapon emplacements. But, inside the graveyard of ships, Sarah's team faced a new problem. The uprising had been successful, too successful. With security systems down and guards scattered, thousands of prisoners were trying to reach evacuation points simultaneously. The corridors were clogged with beings of dozens of different species, all desperate to escape. Captain, Crystal Singer called over the chaos, we need to organize them. Without coordination, they will interfere with each other's escape. Sarah climbed onto a raised platform in the main corridor junction and activated her suit's external speakers. Listen to me, she called out in Standard Galactic. I'm Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. We're here to get you out, but we need to do this properly. The crowd of prisoners gradually fell silent. Sarah could see humans, Altarians, crystalline beings, and species she didn't recognize all looking at her with expressions of hope and desperation. Scientists and technical personnel, you're evacuating through Shuttle Bay 7. Medical personnel and injured, Shuttle Bay 4. Everyone else, form groups by species and head for the main docking bays where our ships are waiting. A voice called out from the crowd, human, with an accent Sarah recognized as originating from the Centauri colonies. Captain, there are still prisoners in the high-security sections. The Void Hunters kept their most valuable captives separate from the general population. Sarah felt her heart sink. The high-security section hadn't been shown in the schematics the prisoners had provided. How many? Maybe 50, Captain. But they're the most important ones, the senior scientists, the engineers who designed the hybrid technology, the cultural leaders who've been resisting the recruitment efforts. Sarah looked at her chronometer. The main fleet was holding its own against the Void Hunter defenders, but they couldn't maintain the attack indefinitely. Every minute they spent in the construct increased the risk of Void Hunter reinforcements arriving. Where is the high-security section? Core level, Captain. But it's heavily defended even with the uprising. The guards there didn't abandon their posts. Sarah made a decision that she knew her training said was wrong, but that her instincts said was necessary. Crystal Singer, escort the main evacuation. Get these people to the ships. Captain, where are you going? To get the rest of them. The journey to the core level was a fighting retreat in reverse. Sarah and 3 volunteers fought their way down through corridors filled with confused guards and escaped prisoners. The deeper they went into the construct, the more organized the Void Hunter resistance became. The high-security section was a fortress within a fortress. Blast doors, energy barriers, and guard posts created multiple layers of defense. But the guards were fighting a two-front battle. They had to defend against Sarah's team while also preventing their most valuable prisoners from escaping during the chaos. It took every trick Sarah had learned during the war, using the construct's own defensive systems against the guards, coordinating with escaped prisoners who knew the layouts, even turning captured Void Hunter bioweapons against their former masters. When they finally broke through the last barrier, Sarah found herself face to face with the most secure prison in the galaxy. The cells were individual force field chambers, each containing a single prisoner of obvious importance. She saw a human woman in a scientist's coat who looked like she hadn't seen sunlight in years. An Altarian male whose bioluminescent patches had dimmed to almost nothing. A crystalline being whose normally radiant form had been reduced to a dull, lifeless gray. "My name is Captain Sarah Chen," she announced as she worked to override the cell controls. "I'm with the Human Defense Fleet, and we're getting you out of here." The human scientist looked up with eyes that held a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Captain, I'm Dr. Elena Vasquez, formerly of the Proxima Research Station." How did you find us?" "Long story, Doctor. Right now, we need to move." As the cells deactivated one by one, Sarah realized she was looking at some of the galaxy's greatest minds, scientists, engineers, and cultural leaders who had been presumed dead for years or even decades. The Void Hunters hadn't just been holding them prisoner, they had been using their expertise to build an empire. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez said as they began moving toward the extraction point, "there's something you need to know. The hybrid technology, the improved bioships, that's not the real project. They've been working on something else. Something much worse." Sarah felt a chill of premonition. "What kind of something?" "A weapon, Captain. A bioweapon that could target specific species based on genetic markers. They call it the final culling. If they succeed in building it, they could wipe out entire species while leaving others untouched," Sarah finished. "They could reshape the galaxy according to their vision." The implications were staggering. The scattered Void Hunter attacks weren't just revenge, they were field tests for a weapon that could eliminate any species the Void Hunters deemed unworthy of existence. "Where is this weapon now?" "Unknown, Captain. The project was compartmentalized. But, if they're close to completion." Sarah didn't need her to finish. If the Void Hunters completed their bioweapon, the scattered raids would become full-scale genocide on a galactic scale. The evacuation from the high-security section was a running battle all the way to the docking bays. Void Hunter guards, realizing that their most valuable assets were being stolen, threw everything they had at the escaping prisoners. But the uprising had weakened their defenses too much, and Sarah's team had the advantage of fighting for something they believed in. When they finally reached the extraction point, Sarah was amazed to see that Crystal Singer had organized the evacuation with remarkable efficiency. Thousands of freed prisoners were being loaded onto human and Kythera ships in an orderly fashion, while the combined fleet held off increasingly desperate Void Hunter counterattacks. "Captain," Commander Walsh's voice crackled over her communicator, "we need to leave now. Long-range sensors are showing Void Hunter reinforcements approaching. At least 20 ships." Sarah looked around the docking bay. There were still prisoners streaming toward the evacuation ships, but the flow was slowing. Most of the construct had been evacuated. "5 more minutes," she replied. "Captain, we don't have 5 minutes." Sarah was about to respond when Dr. Vasquez grabbed her arm. "Captain, wait. The bioweapon project, I remember something. There was a backup facility. A place where they kept duplicates of all the research." "Where?" "I'm not sure. But one of the other prisoners might know." "Dr. Marcus Webb, he was forced to work on the delivery systems. If anyone knows where the backup facility is, it would be him. Sarah looked around the crowded docking bay. Which one is Dr. Webb? Tall human male, graying hair, probably wearing a maintenance technician's coverall because they never let him keep his own clothes. Sarah spotted him near one of the evacuation ships and pushed through the crowd. Dr. Webb? I'm Captain Chen. I need to ask you about the bioweapon project. The man's eyes widened with recognition and fear. Captain, how do you know about that? Dr. Vasquez told me. She said there might be a backup facility. Webb nodded grimly. Station Omega 7. It's hidden in the Shattered Stars Nebula, about 4 light-years from here. If this facility is compromised, they'll move the entire project there. Sarah felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. They could evacuate the remaining prisoners and call this mission a success. Or they could pursue the bioweapon project and risk everything for the chance to stop a galactic catastrophe. Captain, Crystal Singer approached, their armor cycling through urgent patterns. The last shuttles are loading. We must leave. Sarah looked at the thousands of freed prisoners boarding the evacuation ships. Each face represented a life saved, a family reunited, a future restored. But, if the bioweapon project succeeded, none of it would matter. All ships, she said into her communicator, prepare for immediate departure. Set course for the Shattered Stars Nebula. Captain, Commander Walsh's voice was tight with concern, the Void Hunter reinforcements will be here in 3 minutes. Then, we'd better be gone in 2. The combined fleet pulled away from the graveyard of ships just as the first Void Hunter reinforcement ships dropped out of hyperspace. Behind them, the massive construct burned from a dozen internal explosions as the prisoners' sabotage work continued even after their evacuation. But, Sarah wasn't watching the destruction. She was studying star charts, planning their approach to Station Omega 7, thinking about the bioweapon that could end civilized life in the galaxy. The Void Hunters had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that the galaxy's major powers would continue looking inward while they rebuilt their strength in the shadows. They had counted on apathy, on war weariness, on the natural tendency of civilizations to focus on their own problems. They hadn't counted on humanity's stubborn refusal to let monsters win. As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, the freed prisoners began to understand that their rescue was just the beginning. They were no longer victims, they were witnesses, experts, and allies in a fight that would determine the future of every thinking being in the galaxy. The galaxy might have looked away, but humanity was looking straight ahead. And they were bringing friends.